Hey coders, how's it going? Chris here, and today I wanted to introduce you guys to a library called SnapKit. And SnapKit is an Autolayout DSL. So DSL stands for Domain Specific Language, and basically it's like a mini language to describe Autolayout. If you don't know what Autolayout is, I suggest that you check out this video here in the corner. If you click it, it's going to open up a new window where I describe what Autolayout is, but it's a system for laying out your elements and describing how they're sized and how they're positioned relative to the other elements on the view. As with most things, there's more than one way to add Autolayout constraints to your element, and constraint is just a word to describe an Autolayout rule. So you can either add Autolayout constraints through your storyboard to your element, or you can add Autolayout constraints programmatically. Now the issue is when you do it programmatically, there's actually a lot of code to type out just for a single Autolayout constraint, and I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. But using SnapKit, it makes describing those constraints through code a lot easier, a lot more straightforward, and a lot shorter. So you can see kind of an example of this right here. So for a box, which I assume is some sort of element, up here it's a UI view. And if they wanted to make the height 50, they would just do width. Oh, this is both the width and the height is equal to 50. And here it's changing center of that box equal to the center of the view itself. So just with two simple lines, he's able to describe the size and the position of that box. Let's go ahead and install SnapKit for an Xcode project, and I'll show you guys what it's all about. So SnapKit actually is unique in that it has its own little website for its documentation. So I'm going to click that and go to snapkit.io. And then we're going to do a Cocopod install of this library by following these instructions here. And if you don't know what Cocoapods is, you can see here it's a dependency manager for Cocoa projects, and it just helps you manage the different third-party libraries that you use in your Xcode project. Check out the video in the upper right hand corner for a short setup video which shows you how to install Cocoapods and get up and running with it. So click that and it'll open in a new link. Okay, with that said, let's start our Xcode project. I'm going to start a brand new single view application. Create new Xcode project. Single view application, I'm going to call this a SnapKit demo. Make sure that the language is Swift and the device is iPhone, and it doesn't matter what you check off for those three options. And we're going to save it on the desktop. And now we're going to actually close the project because we're going to create a pod file for it. I'm going to hit Command Spacebar to open up Spotlight. I'm going to type in terminal to open up terminal, and here I'm going to type in pwd to check out what directory path I'm at. And because I saved my project on the desktop, and here are the directories in my home folder, I'm going to go into my desktop folder. Those are the files and folders on my desktop. I'm going to go into the SnapKit demo. Remember, if you have a space in your folder, you have to use that slash. Okay, so here I am in my project folder. I'm going to type pod init, and this is only after you have Cocoapods installed. Okay, so now we can go check out our project folder. Okay, so now here's the pod file that it created. So I'm going to right click, open it up with my text editor, and then within here we're going to uncomment the platform line. We're going to uncomment use frameworks because we're using Swift. And let's go back here, and here's the line that we need. So we're going to put that right in there. We're going to hit Command S to save it. Now we're going to jump back to terminal, and we're going to type in pod install. So give that a second for it to go ahead, read the pod file, grab the SnapKit code, and download the files. And here we are. Now if we go back to our project directory, like that, it's created a couple more files. We open up the one called XC workspace. And here I'm just going to press Command B to build the project. And before we start working with SnapKit, let me show you a couple of ways that we can add our auto layout constraints. So in the storyboard here, let me just create a little more space. Okay. So let's say I had a UI view and I added it here, and I wanted to stretch it against the edges of all four sides. I could tap on my UI view, Let's just make it a black color so you can see. And then I would go down here and I would basically add these 4 constraints. I would change the nearest neighbor to the view. And then I would go 0, 0, 0 and add 4 constraints. And then if I update frames, I would see it all stretched out. So that's pretty easy to do. However, there may be cases where you can't add auto layout constraints to your storyboard because maybe the position of your element is dynamic. Maybe you only get that data about where to position it afterward when the app has downloaded some sort of data file. Or in a lot of cases where apps do networking, it's downloading information from feeds and stuff like that. And off of that data, we create objects in the view. For example, in the news app, where the app has to go and retrieve the news, and then for each news article, it creates this little card on the view. So it's going to have to position those things dynamically while the app is running, and you wouldn't be able to do that here via the storyboard. So there legitimately are cases where you need to programmatically assign auto layout constraints. So I'm going to delete that view right here, and then I'm going to go into the view controller, and I'm going to show you just a quick example of what the code looks like if we're going to do it through code. I would say let box equals UI view. So I'm creating a brand new UI view. And then next I'd have to set a property called translate auto sizing mask into constraints equals false. And the reason for this is because by default, your view has an auto resizing mask and it converts those into constraints. And we don't want that to happen. So we're setting that to false because we're going to set our own constraints. So down here, I'm going to write a single constraint to constrain that view to the top and make it 0 against the top of the view. So we would say let top constraint equals NSLayoutConstraint. That's the class, and it's got this initializer here. So which object are we talking about? We're talking about the box. Which attribute are we talking about? We can say dot top related by dot equal to item self dot view. So that's the view of this view controller, which layout attribute of that view. So dot top again, multiplier is 1 and constant is 0. And then we would have to add this constraint to, not to the box actually, but to the parent view. Because if it's a positioning constraint, you add it to the parent view. If it's a sizing constraint, you add it to the box. So this is just for one constraint. We're going to have to repeat this, for the bottom, and then another one for the left, another one for the right. You get the idea. And this is just to do what we did in the storyboard, to make this UI view stick to all 4 edges. So now you can see the type of code that you have to write to do this programmatically. Actually, there's one more thing I forgot to do here, which is to actually add the box into the view. So here we would say self.view.add subview, and we add that box we created onto the view. This is really important because if it's not in the view, you can't add constraints to it, so it would actually create a crash. So when you create an element, make sure you add it to the view before you start putting constraints on it. Okay, now let's do this with SnapKit instead. So I'm going to erase all of this code up to here, and the only 2 lines I'm going to leave is the line that creates the UI view element and the line that adds it to the view. First thing we're going to do up here is say import SnapKit, and then down here let's add constraints. So I'm going to type box dot, and there's a new method or a new set of methods that start with SNP, and if you scroll down you can see all of the different things you can do, but what we want to do is use this one called snap make constraints, and it's got a closure which is just going to be a block of code. I'm going to double click it, and inside the code we're going to type make dot. In here we have a bunch of attributes that we can choose from, and you can kind of chain them as well. So I'm going to say make top dot bottom dot left dot right dot equal to, and then here we can make it equal to another element. So let's choose this one, equal to self dot view. And literally with one line we've made all 4 edges of the box equal to the edges of the self.view, which if you compare it with the code that we had before, it's a huge savings and it saves you time as well. There's actually an even easier way to write this. We can go make.edges equal to self.view, and that's even shorter. So that's why it's called a DSL, because it's almost like a mini language just to describe auto layout constraints. So once you get well versed with all of the different things that you can do with SnapKit, there's a great usage document that shows you a ton of examples on that website, snapkit.io. You can begin to appreciate how much simpler it is to create these auto layout constraints using it. So let's go back to our Xcode project and let's run it. Let's just give this box a background. So here you can see in my simulator, the box, which is black, is attached to all 4 edges using just this one single line of code, as opposed to, the 30 lines of code that we had before. So if you find yourselves writing auto layout constraints in code programmatically, highly recommend you guys to check out SnapKit and check out all of the different things that you can do under the usage section. And I hope it makes your lives easier. I want to thank you for watching and supporting the channel. Please give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.